I would like to give you a quick introduction of Shri Rajesh Kumar Singh. Thank you, sir, for gracing your presence here in the occasion. I welcome you to 18th edition of India Digital Summit. I can proudly say that we stand 40th in the Global Innovation Index, and the Honorable Prime Minister had set a clear vision for digital India, and we are on track to fulfilling the goal of creating $1 trillion economy. Having said that, I have some list of questions for you. I have conducted a poll among the startups, and there are some curious policy questions which young startups wanted to understand. See, as we know that we are recovering from a funding winter in India in general, what are the government's initiatives and plans and strategy to bolster the investment in India, especially in the startup ecosystem of India?
Thank you, Prateek, for inviting me today. Let me start by saying that Government of India is very proud of the startup ecosystem that India has built up, the third largest in the world. We started with about 300 startups in 2016 when the Startup India mission started. We now have on the DPIIT's portal 1,17,000 startups. The way that process has led to this kind of growth and proliferation of startups is a combination of factors that Government of India has tried to put into place. I'll start with the fact that Government of India right now is investing hugely in both in physical and digital infrastructure. I'm sure we'll discuss about our DPI later. In terms of funding, which is the question that you really raised, what Government of India does, DPIIT does, is it provides two sets of funding windows. One is what we call the seed fund scheme, which provides money for early stage startups. And there is also a fund of funds scheme, which is channelized through the SIDBI, the Small Industries Development Bank of India, which leverages about 10,000 odd crores of government funding through these various AIFs, daughter funds, to leverage at least 3 to 4 times that amount. It has already invested in some 700 companies, and it meets some of the funding needs, not all of it, but a good chunk of funding needs in this startup ecosystem. That is what's going on right now. In future, Government of India is looking at creating a separate kind of a window, perhaps for deep tech startups, which perhaps need more of patient capital. And in that area, we are in the process of finalizing a deep tech startup policy, and hopefully, subject to the clearances of people like our finance department, we should be able to create a separate funding window for deep tech startups in particular. Finally, in the recent budget, you would have noticed that there are at least 2 major innovation related announcements by the finance minister, one of which is a 1 lakh crore innovation fund, which will provide a 50-year interest-free loan for R&D activities, including obviously for startups. That could be another source of patient capital for this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, when I started my first venture, I faced a great difficulty in raising angel round. Do you have any plans to set up angel-specific fund for early-stage startup? Do you have a plans to do a public-private partnership to set up a fund which writes a small check size for early-stage startups?
Yeah, so I mean the 2 funds that I mentioned, the seed funds scheme as well as the fund of funds scheme, tries to do that. The first one is for the early stage. The second one is for slightly more mature startups. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we try to ensure that at the state government level, we create an enabling environment for startups. We do this state ranking of states based on their on the combination of policy and other elements constituting the enabling environment for startups in states. We rank the states on that basis, create competition among them, And I think you will find that this combination of some of the funding schemes that we have and some of the funding schemes that are done at the state level through the state startup missions do try to meet some of those funding needs. In addition to that, if there is any specific requirement, as I mentioned, the innovation fund that we are now about to set up as per the budget announcement should also take care of some of these funding requirements as well.
Sir, when I started the company, it was a very very naive idea, to deliver food in the night time, But whenever we start something, there is always a gray area of regulations. Sometimes the laws are not clear, and the entrepreneurs are not aware of regulations. So, what are your plans to streamlining regulation framework, so that doing of business, especially for the startups, becomes easier, and sometimes is lack of education as well, especially the current ecosystem of fintech, edtech, they are fairly regulated space, and a lot of innovation happening, which is the line is very thin. At one side of line you are you are violating the rules, and the other side of the line you are doing sheer innovation. So how do you want to take it forward?
Yeah, so to start with, let me say that obviously regulations are not tailored towards startups. They are obviously tailored for the society or the business community as a whole. What we try to do in DPIIT through our ease of doing business reforms is to try to sort of reduce the compliance burden across the board for everybody, including startups. That move started really with our abysmally low rankings in the World Bank's ease of doing business rankings, where we were, I think, 128 at one time. In 2019, by 2019, we'd raised it to about 63, I think. That was a jump of 75 odd places, and we did that through a combination of reforms in areas like construction and building permits, the time taken to register companies, that kind of a thing. Now, to be honest, in that space, there's still a lot of work to do in two areas in particular. One is contract enforcement and compliance, and the other is property registration, title, etc. Those are areas where we still continue to be fairly low. What DPIIT tries to do in terms of ease of doing business is because most of these compliance issues relate to local and state governments, and they also constitutionally fall under their domain. So we can't really sort of crack the whip. What we try to do is create competition among the states through an annual ranking system for states based on what we call a yearly business reform action plan, which essentially lists out some 300 to 400 compliances where we feel that things could be simplified, digitized, made simpler. And that really has shown tremendous sort of traction among the states, because for chief ministers, their ranking on the ease of doing business scale is very, very important from the political point of view. So, and that is why we've seen, for example, compliances really being brought down across the board. Since you mentioned fintech, let me turn there, because that's a fairly specific domain in which DPIIT perhaps does not have so much of a role. It's really an RBI, SEBI kind of a space. But I was part of the fintech interaction with the Honorable Finance Minister, RBI, and other colleagues from the startup ecosystem yesterday. And I thought the suggestions were very interesting and useful from the startups. I mean, for example, I was not aware that on the KYC side, we still do a lot of paperwork. And I mean, we've digitized almost everything under the sun, and we've not been able to digitize KYC for the banking system. That is, that was new to me, and something that I'm sure the RBI will look at. Similarly, in some areas like regulatory compliances, where there is a lack of awareness about the latest set of regulations that RBI may have issued, the Honorable Finance Minister has set up an institutional mechanism, a monthly sort of VC, where where fintech firms can participate and take clarifications, resolve their queries about the latest set of regulations. Hopefully that will also take care of a lot of, lack of clarity sometimes leading to non-compliance with certain regulations. That is broadly what I wanted to say. This is a very vast subject. We can spend probably more time on it. But if there's any specific issue you'd like to raise on compliances, generic, which are not related to fintech, please let me know. Wherever you feel that there is a compliance which is onerous or vexatious or it is causing duplication, I mean, the way I see it, you should, if you approach me or DPIIT with this, what we can do is we make it part of the next year's business reform action plan. That is the, usually the trigger for state governments to start acting on some of these. Thank you.
No, sir, this is very helpful. There is one specific issue which all the startup ecosystem faces around the ESOP policy, around the ESOP, early share option policy for our early team members. See, one part of it is the tax on the ESOP is at very higher side. It is 45% blended. It's like income tax slab. And the early team members work as hard as founders, and we enjoy long-term capital gain tax as a founders, because, the taxation on the early employees is very higher. And second part of it is to vest and excise those stocks, I have to pay the tax upfront, but my liquidation will happen at a later stage. That's a specific issue we have raised earlier as well, to Honorable Piyush Goyal ji.
Yeah.
And we should take this up in the next year reforms. This will relieve a lot of burden on our early stage employees. My team is sitting here as well as smiling at me.
So I'm aware of this. This is a kind of double taxation, I agree. And if my memory serves me right, DPIIT has actually been taking up this issue with the Ministry of Finance earlier also. We will continue to do so, as Mr. Piyush Goyal may have promised you in that meeting that he had with some of our unicorn founders. We will take it up again, and let's hope that we can jointly convince the Finance Ministry on this issue.
So one more suggestion, you should have a round of applause for this thing at least, one more thing, can we have, some sort of single window clearance? One of the suggestions came from our startup peers for the startups, see, although it's very difficult to define a startup as well, but do we have any such sort of scheme in existence? And of course, DPIIT is doing a great job in helping all of us to to clear our issues or to educate ourselves how to navigate through government things.
So, National Single Window does exist already. It's there on DPIIT's, one of the portals that DPIIT manages is the National Single Window. I wouldn't say that it is totally integrated with all, it is partially integrated with most of our ministries. It is not fully integrated with the states, and which is where most of the sort of compliance issues that you may face may be arising. It's a kind of work in progress, but whether we can do something for startups over and beyond this National Single Window, which obviously is being used by companies and businesses in general, that, I mean, I take it as a good suggestion. Let me see whether we can do something over and above the National Single Window as a special sort of streamlined approval process for startups in particular. Let me see whether we can do something on that scale as a microsite or an additional sort of facilitation window within the National Single Window.
So my next question is India is establishing its tech startup ecosystem very well. How do you see the macro evolving, and what are the opportunities and challenges we do have in upcoming years? And specific to that, I would like to ask you, the second question is around deep tech policy. What are the opportunities for the young startups? We have recently heard in the previous session that next billion-dollar companies, like, will be based on the AI, the new age technologies, like. So would like to know your views on this, sir.
So in terms of what of future trends, let me say that India's investment in its digital infrastructure as a public, open platform centered sort of initiatives is pretty unique in the world. I don't think other countries follow this model where we set up public platforms and we essentially get private sector to sort of build on it, improve on it, develop good use cases on it. Our payments ecosystem is the most sort of successful example of that. We are trying to do something similar in the retail and e-commerce space through ONDC, which is also after an year of very slow movement is now gaining traction with almost 6 lakh transactions a month in the last month. It's really picked up both in the mobility and in the retail space. In terms of other trends, I would say that some of the digital infrastructure that we've built in areas like logistics, where we have a unified logistics interface platform and a logistics data bank, both of which have, provide access to the private sector. That's another area where a lot of private logistics companies are already taking advantage of that data, the visibility of their consignments to build useful, good use cases, to improve their performance, to track their performance parameters, etc. So that's one sort of trend which will continue, that India will continue to invest in its digital public infrastructure, make it bigger, take it global. We are already talking to countries, particularly of the global south, and taking some of these initiatives outside. There is also the PM Gati Shakti, which is again a geospatial platform which really tries to provide, do proactive planning of infrastructure, physical infrastructure for the country. That's another sort of DPI which will hopefully see a lot of adoption across countries, particularly in the global south, as I mentioned. Other areas that I see or I would like to focus on are deep tech, creation of IPR in this country. We've tried to sort of really reform our patent office in the last couple of years in terms of providing them enough human resources and manpower. So we've really crunched the patent examination time from about 5,000 odd patents granted in 2014. This year, we are going to end up with 1 lakh plus patents being granted. So it's a huge exponential jump. These are the areas where we would like to see the startup ecosystem growing, creating value for themselves and for the country.
Thank you so much for this detailed answer, sir. So a lot of our Indian startups, are willing to work with government, willing to work for government. Like a lot of government issues we can solve with the new age technology, with the new innovation which we are doing. So what are your plans to make public-private partnership more accessible to startups in general and in general, the entire business ecosystem? Especially, I come from edtech background, and edtech and the healthcare are the two sectors where a lot of innovation is happening, but there's not much public-private partnerships are happening. So how can we, make a inclusive ecosystem or some policy framework where a lot of private players or a lot of new age startups can come and solve the problems of state?
So we do have a annual sort of problem-based hackathons, which many different government ministries do, including my own. And as a result of that, we've created this annual awards framework for startups, many of whom, after getting their awards, have received greater recognition, funding. Some have become unicorns as well. So that's one way of supporting the ecosystem, creating, giving them some name recognition and traction in terms of getting both orders from the government and perhaps funding from the venture capital funds. Other ways of doing the same thing I've seen being sort of adopted at the state level as well. Other area where we could probably work together is the overall area of government procurement, where frankly we've not moved as fast as we should. Defense is one area where there is a relatively successful procurement process through the initiative called IDEX, where significant number of procurements and orders are being given to startup firms who created prototypes that are of interest to the three defense arms. In them, the general impression is that the Navy is the one which is the most advanced, which has placed the most orders, which takes decisions most quickly. But the other two have also started working closely with the startup ecosystem. In terms of general government procurement, we've tried to create a runway on the government e-marketplace GEM for startups. Again, providing some relaxations in terms of prior track record and other sort of eligibility criteria relaxations to ensure that startups are able to bid for government contracts. So those are the two areas where we've taken some initiative. I think GEM so far we've placed 17,000 crore odd orders on startups, but I don't know how many of them are genuinely innovative startups, or some could be purely startups in the sense that they've started business recently. I think procurement is an area where we could probably do a little more in terms of mainstreaming from the startup ecosystem, using the IDEX initiative as a kind of a template for doing it across other departments as well.
A lot of work have happened in infrastructure, like, a lot of SPCV formations, and there are a lot of quick, from RFP processes have happened. Like, the similar public-private partnerships may happen in deep tech, may happen in tech, we hope. Like, one question is for you is, like, a lot of startups want to take their product and services to the international markets. What all general help we can get from the government, and any light on this subject, sir?
If you're talking about product startups, then I mean, e-commerce, use of exports, ensuring that the startups can access national and international markets. Those are things we can work on together, whether through initiatives like ONDC or through other systems like the initiative for ensuring that all our post offices and our districts are provided the capacity to ensure that consignments can be shipped abroad directly from those facilities. But if you have any specific suggestion in that area, I mean, we'll be happy to work with you, because obviously DPIIT and commerce work together when it comes to building up our manufacturing capacity for exports. It's an area where we've not done as well as we have in service exports. In service exports, the best thing India has done really, frankly, is to create this DPI to ensure data costs are low, to ensure a 5G rollout in over 700 districts in the country at the fastest pace, perhaps in the world. That combination of factors is propelling, in a sense, the service industry to access national and international markets. But if there are any specific suggestions in that area that you'd like to give us, we'll be happy to work with you.
One thing is, we have Indian foreign services across globe, and and if we can get the access to that channel to set up offices, to set up our product and services in various countries, that would be very helpful. I'm sure, DPIIT would be working on this, and ONDC network, first Singapore market has been explored under your leadership. So that has been a very fruitful for a lot of our e-commerce product to explore Singapore market. And we are very glad for this initiative. Similarly, like, Indian foreign services can be used in terms of helping and easing out the business practices in respective countries. In the interest of time, I would like to ask the last question. There are a lot of young startups and there are a lot of young companies. What advices you would like to give them, from a government standpoint? We all can learn a lot from you. You have amazing career in government and you have set up multiple offices. Any advices for young startups out there, sir?
Uh, uh, I mean, I don't know if one should give, you know, advice to startups. I think you are probably brighter than many of us, and you have better ideas, new ideas. I would really request you to follow your dream and make that a reality. And through you, the country will realize its dreams as well of becoming a developed country. But if there is something to learn from what we've seen in the past couple of years in the startup ecosystem, it is that when we grow fast, we sometimes try to move too fast. I mean, even if the compliance burden seems a little bit onerous at times, it's better to sort of ensure that we are in compliance. It's also not a good idea to uh, to to use the availability of cheap money in order to sort of and burn it in a way that is not sustainable. So I mean, I would say generally a combination of uh, innovative thinking, but prudence on the finance side or on the compliance side, that would probably be warranted in our as we try to sort of move fast in disrupting, innovating, and taking India to the next level. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful suggestions. And we believe we will, as a startup community, we will contribute a lot in upcoming years, in terms of overall economy and innovation and solving the real problem for the India. Thank you so much, sir.